Are you ready to dive into the shadows of abandoned places? Join me as we uncover three true, chilling tales from the world of urban exploration. We're talking about the places where time stands still, where whispers echo through the emptiness, and where the veil between our world and something else feels terrifyingly thin. Tonight, we delve into the stories of those brave, or maybe foolish enough to venture into these forgotten corners of the world. We'll hear about their encounters with the unexplained, the lingering energy of past tragedies, and the things that go bump in the night. So, dim the lights, grab your flashlight, and prepare to be thoroughly spooked. These are the true urban exploration nightmares. Our first story takes us to the outskirts of Detroit, to a crumbling monolith of a building that was once Mercy Hospital. This place was shut down decades ago, plagued by rumors of medical mishaps and mysterious deaths. But what happened to one group of urban explorers here goes way beyond your typical cold spot or disembodied moan. They entered the hospital through a broken window in the dead of night, their flashlights cutting through the thick, dust-filled air. Right off the bat, the energy was heavy, oppressive. Shadows moved at the edge of their flashlight beams. Disembodied whispers seemed to come from the walls themselves. They reached the hospital's abandoned pediatric ward and found a solitary teddy bear propped up on a gurney. As they pressed on, their excitement quickly morphed into unease. The air grew colder, the shadows more pronounced, and the whispers louder. They reached the operating room and found a single word scrawled across the wall in what appeared to be dried blood: leave. Ignoring the warning, they continued their exploration. In the morgue, one of the explorers swore he saw a figure standing at the end of the hallway, its eyes glowing an unnatural red. Realizing they had pushed their luck, they made a hasty retreat, running until they were safely outside. They never went back. Did they truly encounter something sinister in the depths of Mercy Hospital? Our next tale takes us to the rolling hills of Pennsylvania, to a place called Cranbrook Mental Asylum. Cranbrook was abandoned in the 1970s after a particularly nasty incident involving a fire and a mass breakout. Naturally, this made it a prime target for urban explorers. Our intrepid explorers, let's call them the adventurers, decided to spend a night in Cranbrook. They arrived at the asylum as the sun began to set, casting long, creepy shadows across the sprawling grounds. The main building loomed before them, its windows like vacant eyes staring out. Undeterred, they made their way inside. The air inside was thick with the smell of decay and something faintly metallic. As they ventured deeper, they began to notice things that sent chills down their spines. Scrawled messages on the walls, restraints hanging from the ceiling, and unsettling sounds. They reached the asylum's main common area where a solitary piano stood. One of the adventurers, Sarah, decided to play a tune. As her fingers touched the keys, a discordant melody filled the air. Suddenly, the piano stopped playing, and Sarah saw two skeletal hands resting on the keys beside hers. Sarah screamed, and the hands vanished. Shaken but determined, they pressed on to the medical wing. There they found rusty medical instruments and bloodstains that even decades couldn't erase. They felt a presence following them, a cold spot moving with them from room to room. In the electroshock therapy room, the machine suddenly sprang to life, whirring and buzzing with an unholy energy. The adventurers watched in horror as the machine pulsed with a life of its own. They turned and ran, fleeing the asylum. As they sprinted through the corridors, they could hear the whirring of the machine following them. They didn't stop running until they were safely outside. They left their equipment behind, vowing never to return. Our final tale takes us beneath the bustling streets of Paris, to the miles of tunnels and chambers that make up the infamous Catacombs. These catacombs, a labyrinthine network of passageways, have long been a source of fascination and fear. They hold the remains of over 6 million people, their bones meticulously arranged in macabre displays. But beyond the well-trodden paths open to tourists lies a darker, more mysterious world. Our explorers, the undergrounders, were a group of experienced cavers and urban explorers. They had spent years delving into the hidden corners of cities, uncovering secrets that most people would never dream of. Their leader, a seasoned explorer named David, had always been drawn to the unknown, the places where history and legend intertwine. They'd heard rumors of tunnels beyond the official catacombs, places where no sane person would dare to tread. These were the forbidden zones, whispered about in hushed tones by those who had ventured too far and lived to tell the tale. The stories spoke of strange occurrences, of people disappearing without a trace, and of eerie sounds that echoed through the darkness. Armed with maps and headlamps, they descended into the depths. The entrance to the forbidden tunnels was hidden, known only to a few. As they made their way down, the air grew colder, and the light from the surface faded away, leaving them in an oppressive darkness. The air was heavy, thick with the smell of dust and damp earth. Every step they took seemed to stir up ancient particles, remnants of a time long past. The walls, once meticulously carved, now bore the marks of age and neglect. As they ventured deeper, the official catacomb walls gave way to rough-hewn tunnels. These passages were narrower, more claustrophobic, and seemed to twist and turn without reason. It was as if they were being led into the very bowels of the earth. The silence was broken only by the sound of their own breathing and the drip of water. Each drop echoed through the tunnels, creating an eerie symphony that heightened their sense of isolation. The further they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. They navigated through a maze of tunnels, their headlamps casting flickering beams. The light seemed to struggle against the darkness, barely illuminating the path ahead. Shadows danced on the walls, creating the illusion of movement in the periphery of their vision. They stumbled upon a chamber filled with strange symbols etched into the walls. These markings were unlike anything they had seen before, a language lost to time. The symbols seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, drawing them closer. In the center was a stone altar, stained a dark, rusty color. It was clear that this place had been used for rituals, though what kind they could only guess. The air around the altar was colder, and a sense of dread filled the room. One of the undergrounders, David, noticed a small silver locket on the altar. It seemed out of place, a delicate object in such a foreboding setting. He picked it up, feeling its weight in his hand, and carefully opened it. Inside was a miniature portrait of a young woman, her eyes wide with fear. The detail was exquisite, capturing the terror in her expression. It was as if she had been frozen in a moment of pure horror. As David stared at the locket, he felt a cold hand grip his shoulder. The touch was icy, sending a shiver down his spine. He spun around, expecting to see one of his friends, but there was no one there. He spun around, but there was no one there. The tunnel was empty, the darkness pressing in on all sides. The sense of being watched was overwhelming, and he could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Thoroughly creeped out, they decided to turn back. The sense of unease had grown too strong, and they knew it was time to leave. But as they retraced their steps, they realized they were lost. The tunnels all looked the same, and their maps were no longer of any use. Panic set in as they wandered aimlessly through the labyrinth. The walls seemed to close in on them, and the air grew colder with each passing moment. Their headlamps flickered, casting eerie shadows that played tricks on their minds. They stumbled upon another chamber with a deep, dark pit in the center. The pit seemed bottomless, a gaping maw that threatened to swallow them whole. The air around it was thick with an unidentifiable stench, a mix of decay and something far more sinister. From within the pit came a low, guttural growl. It was a sound that seemed to resonate deep within their bones, a primal noise that spoke of ancient, hidden terrors. The growl grew louder, reverberating through the chamber. Something dark and massive emerged, its eyes glowing an eerie red. The creature was unlike anything they had ever seen, a monstrous form that defied description. Its presence filled the chamber, and the air grew thick with fear. The undergrounders scattered, but the creature was faster. It moved with an unnatural speed, its eyes never leaving its prey. The tunnels echoed with the sound of their frantic footsteps and the creature's relentless pursuit. One by one they were picked off, their screams echoing through the tunnels. The darkness seemed to swallow their cries, leaving only silence in its wake. David, the last one left, knew he had to find a way out. David, the last one left, saw a single word scratched into the tunnel wall. Run. The message was clear, a desperate plea from someone who had faced the same terror. He didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled to his feet and ran, eventually finding his way back to the familiar tunnels of the official catacombs. The sense of relief was overwhelming, but the memory of what he had seen would haunt him forever. The undergrounders had ventured too far, and the catacombs had claimed them, leaving only David to tell their tale. Thanks for joining me on these spine-chilling adventures. Remember, some mysteries are better left unexplored. The world is full of forgotten places, each with its own story to tell, its own secrets to keep. But sometimes those secrets are best left undisturbed. Urban exploration can be thrilling, a way to connect with history and explore the hidden corners of our world. But it's important to remember that these places are often dangerous, both physically and perhaps paranormally. So, stay safe and keep the curiosity alive, but maybe stick to well-lit, populated areas. Places where you're less likely to be chased by shadowy figures, disembodied hands, or ancient unspeakable horrors.